Abhishek is known to some of you. Some of you know about him through Madhu or through me. And I sent you the material so that I didn't have to talk about the details. But what a lovely man and an ardent collector with the most incredible taste and a generosity of spirit that is unique. And I still covet the goat next to your desk at your office. It is so gorgeous. Who is it, Bewa? Am I pronouncing?
Manjeet Baba.
Yeah. Oh, I'll send you all pictures. If it ever goes missing from Bangalore, you can come visit it at my house.
Sure.
Anyway, Abhishek, please, will you begin?
Sure. Thank you so much, Barbara, for giving me this honor and to invite me to your Sunday Salon. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking out the time. Barbara has been a dear friend, somebody who I met at the CCC, where I met some of you before. And it was there where she decided to come and help us in our journey with MAP, which I'm going to talk about. Barbara, in fact, I must add, has become our most recent founding circle member, and I have her permission to announce that here. So she is supporting MAP by a generous donation and is now going to be, besides a big donor in terms of her jewelry collection, also a founder of the museum. So welcome to the family, Barbara, officially.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. What I thought I would do is take you through a small presentation that I've put together. Please feel free to interrupt at any point of time. If I can share my screen and take you through that. And since Merle, you were talking about the bouquet of flowers, I thought I would start with that.
Okay.
So let me know if you all can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to put it on full screen. Okay. So it's really about my journey with MAP and how it all came about. And I'm going to start with the bouquet, which I had told you about. And this is a bouquet of flowers, which I gave my parents on their silver wedding anniversary, which was about 35 years ago, or maybe even earlier. I can't even remember. It was sometime in the 80s. And my sister and me were wondering what is a good gift to give our parents, somebody who had everything. So we thought we would commission 20. Let me first say that story and then I'll start sharing my screen. Will be easier because let's see everybody right now. One sec.
Oh, here I am.
Yeah.
Hi, Jerry.
So what we did was we said, let's give them a bunch of flowers, but a bunch of flowers that would never wilt. So we went and commissioned 25 of India's leading artists to paint a flower each, one for each year of their marriage. And together we would call it the bouquet. And, you know, I was about 17 or 18 at that time, and I couldn't keep this idea totally to myself. And it took us almost a year to commission. So in the process, we did end up telling our parents that we are giving you a bunch of flowers. And we kept talking about it, but they didn't have any idea what these flowers were. On the morning of the anniversary, we went in with this bouquet of flowers and a bouquet of gladuli, and they were almost crestfallen. They said, "Is this the bouquet you've been raving about for the last 8 months?" And we said, "No, this is not the bouquet. You're going to get it later on tonight." And every time a big bouquet came that day, because they had hundreds of bouquets and, you know, there was this big party at home. And every time a large bouquet came, they said, "Is this the bouquet?" And we said, "No, ours will be the last bouquet that would come." And at the end of the party, when they went back to their bedroom, they had this bunch of flowers hanging there. So the reason I just wanted to talk about that story is it became something where we commissioned 25 artists, but we ended up getting 32 flowers, because there were artists who we didn't commission who ended up making flowers because they wanted to be part of this bouquet. And everybody in India had gotten to know about it, all the well-known artists, and they all felt that they were, it was unfair to leave them out. So they said, let's paint a flower and give it in any case. We ended up using only 25, but all 32 are there. And when the pandemic started, we said, why don't we reach out to people who are interested in MAP and cheer them up and send them this bouquet of flowers and ask them to add a flower to the bouquet, which we could also electronically share with everyone. And within about a week of sending out this bouquet, we must have received hundreds and hundreds of flowers. And until the press picked it up and they said, is this a closed door thing or can we share this in turn? And then we quickly turned it into a website. Mother's Day was coming. All the florists were shut. Everybody wanted to send their mothers a bunch of flowers. So we said, why don't you log on to bouquetofhope.com, and in turn, you can choose a bouquet from within this bouquet and send it in turn. So now it became a messaging site where you could write Happy Mother's Day or Happy Birthday or just send it. You can do this over WhatsApp, you can do this over Facebook, and it's really grown organically into something else. So that's how it tied up to what we were trying to do. But now to come back to what we are doing with the museum, I'll just start sharing my screen again and take you through the. So the museum is called the Museum of Art and Photography. We realized that India doesn't have too many great museums. And the family had put together this collection, which we felt is now something that we should share with everyone. And the family put together 50% of the cost of the project, gave that. We ended up buying the land, and this is where the land is located. To give you a sense of, the dark green is the main park in Bangalore. The big red spot in the center of your screen is where MAP is located. And if you see the two red dots on further to the left, that's the main Secretariat building and the High Court. So you can see we are in the same axis. And the two rings right across from MAP are the two main government museums across the road. So we ended up getting the land right across the main museums to locate it within the museum district. And this is what the building is going to look like. We were about to open in December, but because of COVID, the plans got moved. The lockdown meant a 6-month delay in our construction. So we'll only be physically open next year, but we are going ahead with a digital opening as we had planned on the 5th of December. This is about a month ago, what you saw of the construction, and I'll talk about what this mural that you're seeing over there. It's on the corner of Kasturba Road. The collection we have divided into 6 basic categories, and it is photography, classical or pre-modern art, modern and contemporary, folk and tribal, textile, craft and design, and popular culture. It's an Indian collection, and the reason we divided it into these 6 is generally you have high art and low art being segregated, but we didn't want that distinction over here. And we put folk and tribal, textile, craft and design, and popular culture on the same level playing field as modern and contemporary, classical or photography. Inclusion is a large part of what we believe in. This is not as per law in India as it is in most other parts of the world, where you've got to do things for making it accessible to people with disabilities. But we got a large grant from Emphasis, who made this possible for us. And it's not only for people with disabilities, but even looking at things like financial disabilities and other kind of disabilities. So we are going to have a certain timing where it would be free to anybody who would like to come in and stuff. Education and outreach is a big focus for us. What we did was, we said until the building gets ready, let's build an education lab, a technology lab, and a conservation lab, so that we can already start working on our programming. And what you're seeing here is in our physical education lab, where our education in charge, Shilpa, is with a bunch of kids from school. We've had almost 90 plus free workshops. We've had 3,000 children. It's not 300 as wrongly written here. Of course, everything has moved digital right now since the pandemic. And earlier we were doing everything physically, only restricted to schools from Bangalore. but now we have gone to various other places because there's no limit to getting it all online. Our talks, which we were having physically at the Bangalore International Center, have again all moved digital and online. We've had almost something like we are doing about 2-3 talks every month besides webinars. And earlier, when people used to crib about driving across Bangalore to attend our talks, now we have people from about 30 different countries who log in and have a look at what we are saying. We've also expanded our reach of the kind of speakers we are getting, and we've had people like Marina Abramovich and Sebastião Salgado and others, where earlier they would have had to travel for 2 days to Bangalore, and right now it takes just 5 minutes to log on. We've been very actively loaning our collection to different institutions, and this particular, these images are from a show that happened in Jaime for the Jaime and Al Photography Festival end of last year. And we've actively been loaning to the NGMA, the Tate, Met, and various other institutions. In our conservation lab, we've already restored over 200 artworks, and now we are even taking in work from people who want their artworks restored. So it's not just the museum's collection. And this was made possible to us from Tata Trust. Something I'd like to add over here is art, culture, and heritage is not something which is very easily being supported in India. In fact, it receives less than 1% of CSR support. Bulk of it goes towards health, education, water, the environment, female sanitation, and stuff like that. And just to put something in perspective, we have about 1,000 odd government museums in the country. The government alone has a fairly large budget for art, culture, and heritage. But when you compare it to what the Western world spends, what India spends on art, culture, heritage, archaeology, all these museums, all our cultural festivals, it put together is equivalent to just the budget that the Metropolitan Museum has every year. So it's one museum in New York equal to the entire country's budget for art, culture, and heritage. And even when it comes to private philanthropy in the arts, it's minuscule, partly because there is really no tax incentive to do so. And most people over here are thinking that, they would much rather support, art is considered elitist and it's not considered for everyone. And that's the reason that really nothing much has happened in the art and culture space. But we all know art is not elitist and it's for each one of us. We've been fortunate that we've managed to get quite a few of the leading Indian corporates and the big business houses to look at art and culture quite promisingly. And for many of them, it was the very first investment that they'd made. In terms of technology, we've been doing a fair bit. We've got a fairly extensive holography team, and that has made all our objects, 3D objects, to be scanned from all sides so that you can view it in different ways. And we sent our CTO to various museums around the world to see what they were doing. And a lot of our museums in India have really not had much of an upgrade since the time the British left. So you can imagine that technology is something they barely understand. We've also recently launched what we call Map Labs, and that is where art and technology come together. And corporates like Microsoft and Accenture and various others are working with us to develop different solutions for this. In terms of governance, we have a board that we've set up in the US because we also have a 501c3 there. We have an Indian board, we have an advisory panel, and our trustees. And you can see there are many people from the museum world, from academics, from industry, from philanthropy, from around the world. And between the 4 boards, we've got almost 30 people involved with us. In terms of support, we have the founding patrons and the founding circle. And you can see our host, Barbara, is also featured prominently amongst our founding circle members. Our founding patrons are people who've given leadership gifts of $1 million or more to us. We also have various people who've given us collections. And these are collections both from, again, you have Barbara's name here, you have collections which have come in from India and from overseas, and many who've given in-kind support. And when we say in-kind, it is in terms of material or infrastructure or services that we require for the building. A big part of our focus is the MAP Academy, which is totally an online and free learning tool that we are putting together. It basically comprises of three main parts. There's an encyclopedia of Indian art, and which we are writing from scratch. And this being 2020, I'm sorry to say that India still doesn't have a comprehensive encyclopedia of Indian art. So there are about 15 PhD students who are putting this together. We also have a series of courses that we are putting together. There's intermediary courses, there's beginner courses, and there are diploma courses. And we are tying up with different universities. So if you're taking up a credited course, you would have to pay for it, but otherwise that is available for you for free. And there's a tools and resources where we are putting together everything that has been put together for art and culture, be it by a university or a museum. So that comes together here and you can channel it all from one place. MAP Online is our membership program that we are also going to be launching in December, which would, you know, we realized when we are going to be one of the first museums to launch digitally, and the building would not be ready for almost a year thereafter. If the museum is open and it is open on your computer screen, then why should we restrict the members to just Bangalore? But we can have members from around the world. And many corporates are signing in thousands of people to become members because they've seen the kind of stuff that we are putting there. So right from exhibitions to events, to researching the collections, to streaming, to learning, to kids, all that would be available on MAP Online. We have, so I was talking to you about this work, the mural that we had done. To break this impression that the museum is elitist, we actually caught hold of one of the most marginalized communities in Bangalore. And this was a group of trans women and women artists who were without a job at this time. And we asked them to do this commission on our shuttering. It is 60 feet by 20 feet. It got completed last month. It's called The Story of Bangalore. And you can see a lot of them posing in front of this. So it took them about 10, 12 days to paint together, and about 13 of them did it. It's the people who make the city of Bangalore, from the techies to the poor karmikas, who are the people working there, to the elderly, to your migrant labor. And we've shown all kinds of diversity and inclusion over here. The point is, this is going to be till the museum opens, and then we are looking at using this as a fundraising event to raise money and sell this off. And hopefully a large corporate or the airport or a big metro station might end up buying this. We're also designing a whole range of products around this because it's nice and bright and colorful. Right now it's all lit up at night, so it looks lovely, and it's been written about by the press extensively, so it's already creating a lot of news here. This is an interesting project that we launched called Museums Without Borders. And the idea was, how do we get, it's about pairing one object from MAP's collection with another highlight from another collection and putting this together by way of a story and a video. And we've had almost 50 odd museums from around the world who have agreed to be part of this. And it's the story being told through either two curators or an external expert who links this together. And to give you an example, on the left is a painting by Tayyab Mehta from the MAP collection. And on the right is a Nansuk miniature from the British Museum. And here is a theme of music that connects these two stories together. So we have Imar Ramos from the British Museum in conversation with our director, Kamini Sani, and they are talking about, even though it's over 250 years that separates these two paintings, how you can almost feel the rhythm of the drum on one hand, and you can almost see the puffed cheeks and the way the sound is coming out of the turis or these bugles from Jasrota on the other. Another example is an image from a Ram Kumar painting at the Peabody Essex Museum, which was in the Hurwitz's collection. And on the right is a photograph by Jyoti Bhatt. And here it's the gaze, which is the common factor. So very often it could be, you know, the artist, the subject, the theme, the region. There could be any way of connecting them, and it becomes a short 5-6 minute video. And the point is, on our opening, we'll be seeing quite a few of these also being ready. MAP has been in the news about 60 times since the lockdown in the last 6 months. Here are some of the places that they have come on. What I thought I would also quickly take you through some stories from the MAP collection and talk about one or two things from each department. So I'm going to start with textile craft and design. And here we are looking at a skirt. This is a brocade skirt, which was a pre-partition skirt. And what is really exciting about this, and which I'll show you very quickly when I zoom in, if you look at the big sunflower kind of motif towards the bottom, what it has within that is the map of pre-partitioned India. So it's got Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India woven together. It's, of course, very much like the Art Nouveau meets Art Deco kind of period. So it would be from around the late 1930s or early 40s. And here, if you see that detail, you can see what India was like. And, you know, it was a bold statement even on the hand of the craftsman or the weaver to do this, because how else would you be nationalistic in terms of fashion or design? And the entire movement of independence had become something that everybody wanted to participate with, though this would have been done for a wealthy patron, but you know, it may have been a commission piece, or it may have been the creativity of the weaver himself. Here's another example where they chose to weave in the Indian flag. And it almost looks embroidered, but if you look at it up close, it's actually woven in. And this again was around the same time, which was done again for another wealthy patron. We juxtapose this with a few other textiles, and here is a brocade from Ahmedabad or Gujarat, the Ashavali, just to show you different brocades. And this has the peacock and the gopi, so it was made a lot for the people who were in the Krishna sect over there, so that they could be using those motifs quite a bit. On the other hand, you have a brocade from the Baluchar part in Bengal, and here again, very rarely that you have figurative work come in. And this you can see is a railway carriage, and you can see the smoke puffing up on the top left-hand corner, that red bit. And you can see these English people and a couple in the carriage on top. So you would have, you know, people smoking a hookah, or somebody on a fancy European chair, or sometimes a steamboat or a railway carriage, as in this case. This is another one from Maharashtra called Paithani, and quite an unusual one from the Deccan, where you had a horse, a tiger and a lion in combat. And you can see that more in detail over here. And a fairly wide ordni and quite an unusual one. So those were some glimpses from our textile collection. In your classical or pre-modern art, I'm going to talk to you about a painting which is one of my favorites. It's from the Jaipur school. And on the left-hand side, you find various sacred Indian texts. And if you see the one in the middle, that's the Bhagavad, which is supposed to occupy the place of pride amongst all the Indian texts. But this is the very first time it has ever been put in a painting because everybody talked about it, but it was really the oldest painting depicting that. And around it, you can see all the other texts which are there. And on the right-hand side of the painting, you see the way this text has been, orally handed down over the generations. So you have Vishnu telling Brahma and Brahma telling Vyas and Vyas telling Narad and Narad telling Parikshit and so forth and so on. Another painting from the very same series of the Bhagavad Puran is the whole concept of time, which is so brilliantly depicted. Here's this bunch of women who are looking for Krishna, and you see them 7 times within the same painting, but it actually is showing that they've been searching the entire grove looking for him. So it was amazing how the Indian artist could showcase something that was happening in a moment or in a day or even in an hour all together at the same time in one work. And they are literally traversing the entire forest looking for Krishna and not finding him. Here again, just to show you the concept of time, you've got Krishna fighting with the bull, and you see Krishna depicted 4 times. So he is vanquished the bull and he's being showered with these flowers before he's entering that pavilion. So again, the concept of time where this entire thing may have taken him a couple of hours to do, but it is shown all together in one painting. And in fact, Barbara has a beautiful painting also in her living room, which I remember, where again, the concept of time you can see because the same person has been depicted more than once. This is the famous avatar of Vishnu called Narsingh, where it is half man, half beast. And he has been sent down to earth to protect the people because there was this boon that was given to this king who became so powerful, and he was told that he can't be killed by either man nor woman nor beast. He won't be killed during the day or the night. He can't be killed either inside or outside. So therefore you show that Vishnu comes in this form where he is neither man nor beast, and it is neither day nor night at this time, and he's at the threshold. So he's neither indoors nor outdoors, and how he vanquishes him and takes control. But the interesting part here is you see Narsingh being led out of the courtyard. So again, where he is in his full form giving homage to the entire world and showing all the gods that he has removed the obstacles, and then he's again going back to the heavens over there. In the modern and contemporary, I'm going to speak about, again, one of Barbara's favorite artists. She spoke about the goat right in the beginning, but here it is Krishna swallowing the forest fire. And it was Krishna's uncle who was unhappy with him, and he was always trying to finger him. So he sets the entire forest ablaze, and Krishna is there grazing with his friends and his cows. And all of them are huddling together because they don't know what to do. And Krishna says, "Don't worry." And he opens his mouth and just swallows as if he's drinking off the fire. And it's a very large work. This would be almost about 3.5 meters long, and one of Manjeet's most powerful works. But to show you another work of how Manjeet has depicted Krishna, and this is called Krishna the Nut, or the Acrobat, where he's balancing on a watermelon. And we just juxtapose this with how Krishna is being depicted in various forms, and not just in modern and contemporary painting. So here is another, it's a Mewar miniature where Krishna has actually got the entire hill of Govardhan lifted on his little finger. And it was Indra, the god of the skies, who had really unleashed all the rain on him. And everybody from the village came and took shelter under this hillock that he put up. And you see Indra accepting defeat, coming and groveling at his feet below him, and his multi-trunked elephant standing next to him. Here is again Krishna depicted as vanquishing the snake Kalia. And this is actually a photograph done as a postcard, but hand colored, printed in Germany for Brijbasi in Karachi, which was stationers. So how the European market used to look at making stuff for the Indian market. Again, we are talking about the early part of the 20th century. Here it's a company painting from South India where Krishna is stealing butter along with his friends when his mother has been busy churning that. Here is a chromolithograph again from the late 1890s from Bengal where, this kind of behavior would not have been accepted anymore today, but was much celebrated in India earlier. I mean, imagine what we would have had to go through if we did something like this. In the folk and tribal, there is the great Jangar Singh Sham. And if you look towards the bottom of the canvas, those are his hand prints, which go repeatedly in red, green, black, and white all over. And this is again a fairly large 2.3 meter large work. And this is called the Barasingha, or the multi antlered antelope. Jangar Singh Sham was a brilliant artist from Madhya Pradesh. He had a rather tragic life. He was only about 39 when he was almost kept as a prisoner when he was invited to Japan to paint for a museum. And he went into a depression there. He couldn't speak the language. He wanted to get back, but the people insisted that he stay on there and continue painting until one fine day they found him hanging in his room. And it became quite a diplomatic fiasco between India and Japan. His body was brought back. Today, he's been collected by museums around the world. We at MAP were very fortunate to have bought a large collection of his work. This is another large work, which is even larger, about 2.8 meters. It is Birds in a Tree, again by Jangar. Here is a Ganesh with his vehicle, the mouse, and another one, which is the annihilation of Sanbara, the boar, again by Jangar. This one is an interesting drawing done by him. And if you see the connection between the eagle and the snake, and the shading that you see around it is almost like a aura that he does. And it is this lines that he does with pen and ink. And I remember when the person I bought this work from asked him as to what this is. So he said, I asked Jangar the same thing. And he said, what is it that you paint? So he said, this is the aura around every creature. And he asked him that, you mean to say you see the aura? And to which Jangar replied, don't tell me you don't see it. So obviously he had an ability to see the supernatural, which we don't even, he would just take it for granted. In terms of photography, I'm going to show you an interesting depiction of the Last Supper. This is done by an artist called Vivek Vilasani, and he's done a few versions of this. This is the Last Supper in Gaza. It's all women, and it's a rather frugal meal that you can see them all having. It consists basically of bread and pomegranate that each one is having. He's purposely chosen this black and white neutral kind of palette, and it's a social documentary that he was trying to depict as to how subjects could be relevant even today. And this confusion as to who's done it, and there is this gossip happening over there. Contrast this with another work. This is again a very large print on a canvas. It's about 3.5 meters. Whereas this one is the Kathakali dancers having their feast on the banana leaf. And again, there's this confusion as to who has done this. So it's interesting to see. It's a very theatrical kind of a setting. So he would set up these, he would get a bunch of performers, and the whole act of staging a photograph would itself become a ritual that he would participate in. And this is juxtaposed by another Last Supper by Jamni Roy. Here you have only 8 apostles instead of 12, and they are not seated on one table, but they're individual tables. And Christ looks pretty much the same as the others, except for his slightly raised hand. But how the entire mood can still be depicted in the very same way. This was done by Jamni Roy possibly around the 1930s, 1940s in Calcutta, when he was looking at paintings of the Last Supper in books that would come in by the missionaries in Calcutta. And it was his depiction in his total Kali Ghat style, which he had gone to embrace and work on. In popular culture, I have an interesting shrine. This is actually made in multiple layers, which are cutouts of different popular prints of that time. And tell me if you can see this move. Can you see that move very slightly?
Mm-hmm.
So when you wind this up, all the heads and the hands go bobbing left and right. And you've got the Queen Mary and King George on the bottom left and right over there. So it's a lot of fun. You've got Krishna, you've got Annapurna with Shiva, you've got the King and Queen, you've got Shiv, Parvati, you've got Ram, Sita, all of them happening together. So it's a lot of fun. It was done possibly around the early 20th century, and it's a lot of fun. So that is what I had to share with you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a conversation, and please feel free to ask me any questions that you all have.
What I find exciting, Avhishek, is this was almost designed in anticipation of an unknown plague. The museum has gone so virtual and so exciting that by not yet having a physical presence, its digital presence is impressive.
You know, Barbara, we kept hearing that we should turn an adversity into an opportunity, and we really didn't know how to do that. But very early on in the pandemic, when we were having a meeting with the senior team, we realized that for the first time in history, every museum is come to the same situation. They're all shut. So you are at the same starting point. Now, how do you race ahead? And we said the only way we can race ahead is digitally, because that's the only thing that's going to be around for the next 2 years. And I think the change is going to be so permanent that people will never go back completely to a only physical world. The digital world will always be a part of the world that we're going to see. And that's when something like taking all our programming virtually, doing it, you know, because there was no other option in any case. We were at about 30 people when the pandemic started. We are at about 56 now. We've not furloughed a single person. This has been a year where we were going to be raising our endowment. Unfortunately, that has not happened because you know what the world has been. You know, everybody's been supporting the emergency. It's only now that people are beginning to realize that had it not been for the arts, we wouldn't have been able to survive the last 6 months the way we have. So even our virtual membership that we've taken on, it just so happened that all these things came together because of this. And we were very fortunate that we had the technology companies assisting us in doing so. And we had great leaders who told us what to do, and we were willing to listen.
How many years did it take you from just a seed of an idea to reality?
Barbara, I think it's been about 5 years in the making, but you know, that was right from acquiring the land to selecting it, to finding the architect, to getting our boards in place, to setting all those trusts up. So it's been a long journey, but most projects of a similar size in India would take about 3 times the amount of time that we've taken.
Do you feel because you're independent, you have a lot of advantages?
That too, and plus we've not waited for any government support whatsoever.
Are you the newest institution in India in the arts?
That's correct.
How do you think it's going to draw around the world as a very specific type of art in its
You know,
ethnicity?
I think when you look at the kind of size that India has and the demand for art over here, see the reason people in India, I mean, there's this joke that we have some of the most densely populated cities in the world, but our museums are some of the least visited museums. And the joke is that to get away from people, you go to a museum in India. And we are wanting to change that. You know, there are countries, I mean, there are cities whose population is smaller than the number of visitors we get to our museums over here. And they have far bigger, many more visitors to their museums than we do. So it's really a big mismatch. It's just that it's not people in India are not interested in the arts. The government has more important things to do. The private sector has never really bothered about this. They've always thought that this is the prerogative of the government only to be bothering about. And therefore, nobody else does anything about it. The same Indians who travel abroad always go and stand in line to visit museums. But why is it that they don't visit it here? So that's what we are here to change and to be a catalyst in that place.
How competitive is it going to be for you with the larger museums that have major departments in this category to get to procure artwork?
When we are competing only with the government museums, I don't think that we would have any competition at all, because they are not really spending much time, energy, or effort on attracting people to their collections.
What about the international museums?
But the point is, the international museums are not going to be in India. So although we will be physically located in Bangalore, but what we are doing digitally would make it very exciting for people to even visit MAP digitally.
Are the artists in India very supportive of what you're doing, and are they contributing?
A lot of the artists have given us works as gifts. A lot of them are wanting to participate with us and are supporting wholeheartedly. Of course, a lot more will happen once they see it physically open, but there is a fair amount of buzz about it already.
What about the art galleries?
The art galleries too are supporting, although we want to keep an arm's distance from the art galleries because we don't want to have any conflict of interest, that people point a finger that we are siding up with a certain gallery because we are showing their artists or something like that. We want to keep that distinction. And even if we are going to be doing a work of a show of a living artist, there's going to be a restriction that the gallery cannot show their work for so much period before or after the museum show.
Do you have a wish list of the things that you need and want for the museum?
That's a long list, Barbara. Maybe we should have a separate chat.
I opened myself up for that one, didn't I?
Yes, you sure did.
Well, the thing is, currently what we are looking for is support of any kind. Because this was the year we were putting together our endowment, and that's not going to happen very easily with, there were lots of conversations that had started. Everybody who had committed to us is honoring their commitment. But many corporates who we were speaking to, like General Atlantic, MasterCard, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and these were all several $1 million that we were talking about, all those conversations have moved. And for a lot of the Indian companies, when their businesses themselves have been impacted, this is really not the right time to go and ask. However, personal philanthropy has increased at this time because one is people are looking at their own mortality, and secondly, they're all looking for legacy. So a lot of them have come forward, whether it is, a couple of interesting, important paintings that they would like to leave in the name of a family member for the museum, or if they are wanting to join us as a founder and even spread out their commitment over a period of time. We are open to all those ideas, and that's how it's being helped. Of course, we don't have a great collection of classical art as yet. And, but we are always surprised as to what we find. I mean, somebody came and gave us an amazing collection of textiles, which they had collected when they were in India about 35 years ago. And this is a collection which is still sitting in Australia, which we have to bring in, or like what Barbara has given us in terms of a jewelry collection. So a photography collection. I mean, all kinds of things are coming to us.
Well, your efforts have been truly rewarded, that's for sure.
I have a question. One of
Please,
the results when the Film Society at Lincoln Center went virtual this year, they found that their audience actually increased, not only domestically but internationally. And I think that people are seeing this is a real potential to increase their reach. I'm wondering, you talked about digitalizing all of your collection. I'm wondering what percentage of your resources are going into the digitalization of your works in an effort to reach international audiences, as well as expanding the accessibility of your work to domestic audiences.
Yeah, so we have a big focus in that area. It's just that our team is not being able to keep up with all the work that we have. So I think we've got up till the physical opening of the building, which is when we hope to have our entire collection digitized by. But on a daily basis, there are more stuff being added, and you will see a marked difference between what you see on the website right now and once when we are digitally open.
Okay. Do you see yourself as doing, I'm just wondering in terms of presentation, one of the things that a lot of the art museums are doing is they're doing virtual tours. But I see, an extension of that is doing special projects, like doing lectures. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do. Do you have any plans for presenting your like special areas or your strengths in this regard, like academic presentations or?
So there would be all kinds of salons that are also being planned out. What we are doing is we've got these 2-3 talks that happen every month, and we have a webinar that happens every month, which is specific to a particular topic. But when we are doing our membership, we'll be doing different packages for corporates, and depending on the number of members they choose, they can choose, because some of them would be having 5,000 members and 10,000 members. Doing that for a smaller group becomes tougher, because one person wants to hear this, one person wants to hear that. So how many members do you cater to? So we are doing bespoke events for different corporates as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Hey, Abhishek, what did
Yeah, Shoma.
Salgado talk about?
I can send you the links to the talk. It was a conversation between Shahidul Alam and Sebastião Salgado on.
Send it to me too.
Yeah, I will.
All of us.
And then you can send it to the rest of us.
Yes.
Sure. So in fact, what I should do is send you all some of the talks that we've done during the lockdown, so you all can see whichever ones you want to log on.
By all means.
That'd be great.
That's exactly what I was getting to too.
Abhishek, first of all, this is fantastic. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. I mean, it's exciting to see the birth of a new institution. Have you been in touch with Aditya Arya from his new museum in Delhi?
I know Aditya well.
Yeah.
In fact, he has really been fighting the lockdown and opening and bringing people in there. So I'm glad to see that tenacity and that drive in him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more museums there are like that, and this is a situation where you're not in competition. Everything is an addition. Everything grows.
In fact, Alan, it was about last year that somebody approached me with a bunch of very valuable cameras that they wanted to gift. And I said, but why are you giving it to me? Because I would have no use for it. And if you must give this to a museum, let me find you another museum. So I called up Aditya And I asked him if he would want it, and he thought I was mad to not take it. And I said, you know, it's not a matter of me just getting it because it's valuable. It should be where it's going to be used the most. And if it's only going to be in storage at my place, it doesn't make sense. So I had him happy, I had the donor happy, and I didn't have to look after something that I wasn't going to do anything.
That's right.
And it's on display over there. And he was overjoyed. He said, you know, you don't even realize how much these are worth. And I said, well, good luck to you. The whole point is to let it go to the right place that it should.
Right. And if it's not part of your mission, you know, then you really should not be focusing on it. What about the Al-Qazi Foundation? Have you been talking to Rahab, Alyana?
Yeah, I know Rahab well. It's not that we are doing things together, because I think they have plans for their own collection and they've been exhibiting it quite a bit around the world. I mean, of course, we would be, every time we want to borrow something from them, we would gladly ask them, but it's not that we are looking at doing so many shows together.
Great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In building this staff that will, over the long term, make the institution a success, from where are you recruiting the senior staff, both the curation side and the administration side?
So, you know, this has been a slightly challenging thing for us, because there isn't a pool to pull out people from, because there aren't so many institutions over here. And when we started the search for our director, now we've had a director for the last year and a half. And I remember that we were looking overseas much more than we were looking at India. And I didn't want to have the first choice to bring in somebody from outside to be running an Indian institution. The fact that we have 1.3 billion people and I can't find somebody within the country, but where we found a brilliant director in Kamini who did this. But I must say there are a lot of people who have joined us have actually worked with museums overseas. And a lot of them are excited about the possibility of what can happen in India. So quite a few of them have, I mean, it's a young, dynamic team. And it's not everybody who's only from the museum world, but from the art world in some sense or the other. Some have come from the auction house, some have come from a gallery, some have come from a performing space. So, you know, or people who write interesting blogs and do events. So we are putting together this group quite well. And it's thanks to the team that we've been able to do what we've been able to do.
Are they all Indian?
No, so we have English, we have Italian, we have people from all over the place. And in fact, they are spread around the place. We are literally working from home and working from different parts of the world. In MAP and the MAP Academy, this was always planned out as a working from home and a remote working thing. So the team is in about maybe 12 or 13 different cities around the world.
I think COVID to some extent did force you to look at things in a much more contemporary way and to adapt for the future.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's not something that we could have ever planned for, because you only do this when you're forced to.
Well, it worked to your advantage.
Yeah. You know, I must say that it sounds like it was all a plan, but right in the beginning, we were so confused because we just didn't know what to do and how to do it. And in retrospect, these all seemed like good ideas, but when we were debating them out and we were looking at how to do it, I mean, my chief technology officer now jokes that he has finally been upgraded from being in the basement to getting the corner office now, because you know, we thought that this is something that we'll do just when we open. And then when we realized that there's nobody who can do anything without this guy, he suddenly became the most important person, and he got a blanket permit to get another 10 people on his staff.
Is there a particular category or discipline that will be your area of expertise at the museum that you will be known for?
Barbara, I think there would be little pockets in different collections that we have. And it also depends on, I mean, take for example, it could be, an archive that was suddenly gifted to us of a particular photographer, which was from a small town, and that's going to be one of our opening shows. And he has now become such a star, or like a Jangar Singh Sham, whose work I showed you in the folk and tribal. He was an artist who was totally overlooked, and now he's become the darling that way. So we've also noticed that it's not something that remains in fashion or is in fashion remains in fashion forever. It's how you package something, what are the other world events, who else is looking at it, which makes something exciting. And the whole thing is, how do you keep being relevant and keep reinventing yourself? So we say we do not know anything about anything, but we are willing to learn. And that's why we can adapt and look at new things each time. We just got a gift last week, which was another patron from the US. This was a collection that came up on the market over here. It was going to be available for a very short period of time. I was desperate to buy it. I didn't have the funds. I called him up. I sent him images of what they were. He said, I'm wiring you the money tomorrow. Just buy it as a gift from my side. And I can't even believe we managed to get it and save it.
Wow.
Now, if you had asked me that 2 weeks ago, would we have even thought about something like that? No, it just fitted in perfectly. And it was a large sum of money. It was about close to $300,000. But he said, he actually thanked me and blessed me for allowing me to put his name against that, because he said, I know this is worth a lot more money. I would never get my chance to get this. And it cannot be exported from India. So you might as well have it and let this be my contribution to MAP. So there's really God's hand over our head to bless us and allow these things to happen. It is no magic that I'm doing, but there's somebody else who's doing this.
Well, it sounds like you're getting a lot of support, not just from India, too.
But Barbara, then maybe I should not make it sound that I'm getting so much support, because I'm looking for a lot more.
Let me say this. There's never enough. I know that.
This year we were looking at getting about $15-16 million, and I think we'll end up getting not more than 3. So we'll be 1/5 or less than 1/5 of what we were hoping to get. And fortunately, we have enough money to complete the project. But it's not the happiest scenario to be in an uncertain world where you do not know where your money is going to come from for operations. And that's the reason where, I'm now literally on daily calls with patrons who are in turn setting up Zoom calls with people just to spread the word. And every other day, somebody is coming forward who are getting excited about what we are doing and wants to know more. And hopefully some of those would result in them also joining us as being founders or whatever.
Abhishek, one of the things that I find interesting about the current situation is the digital is easily changed out, the galleries. Whereas in a museum, you've got to paint it, you've got to reinstall, you've got to redesign. It takes a great deal of physical effort and internal discussion to create a new gallery or to create a new show featuring an artist within MAP, within the digital. You can be creating compelling shows with more ease because it's images, and then you can have the ancillary discussions with the experts. So I think it's an ideal time for MAP to be up and running, so to speak.
Building an audience.
Yeah, but what's also, though the gap between digital and the physical is narrowing, I hope it never comes to that, that we would only end up seeing art
Agreed.
on a screen and we don't need to go to a museum, because,
Agreed.
you know, there was this entire
So
debate
true.
that do we need a building at all? And I hope that day never comes where the gap between the two becomes so little that you can skip one for the other.
Well, don't forget, your audience is of a certain age. And the only way in my art history classes in college that I could see anything was on a slide.
Yeah.
So it's not that much different. But when I went to Europe for the first time, I stood there and cried because I was standing in front of it. So I don't think you ever lose that desire to see the real thing. But if digitally is the only way that you can do it, it's a start.
Yeah, at least it's better than nothing.
Abhishek, this is Shoma.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Shoma.
Because you're in Bangalore, the garden city, and then King Gowda made all the lakes. It was man-made lakes. It's such a great setup for sustainability and environment, because that's a great way for CSRs to contribute money. Your physical building, how sustainable is it? I'm sure you incorporate that into your design, because that's something you can highlight. Because I looked for it on the website.
So we've done all that in terms of both solar and water and all that. So we've done that, but you know, it's a small plot. It's, if this was on acres of land where we could have made everything neutral, we would have done that. But it's an efficient building. It's bang in the center of town. We can't do what we would have been able to do had we had much more land, but we are doing whatever best we can.
I have a question, Abhishek. I know
Please, Anu.
from our conversations before, you've been collecting from the time you were very, very young, almost barely out of childhood. And I know that you've been close to so many artists. And as a follow-up question to what we were discussing, how do you communicate to people that are, 15, 18, 20, 22 now, that have grown up in a digital world? How will you still be able to send them the parallel message that actually standing in front of a work is a different experience? Because I'm sure for you, having stood in front of thousands of paintings, and many times when you were in a situation of deciding whether you wanted to acquire something or not, if you've been in a situation that you could see the work, I'm guessing you almost always chose to go and stand in front of it.
Totally. And you know, the thing is, I would say a lot of the kids today are being exposed to art a lot more than our generation was. Partly it may be because, you know, kids from our kind of families have just grown up with art. Our parents didn't collect as much art as our generation does. And the whole debate around contemporary art, and also because of the prices that it has fetched and photography, people are becoming a lot more house proud also these days. So we've got a young patrons program that we've started, which is young collectors starting from 21 till I think sometime in their 30s. And that's a group that is really adding on to our database a lot. And we are doing programs for them where it is meeting an artist or learning how to bid at an auction or how to start a collection and stuff like that. And you can see a fair amount of them are genuinely interested in how this process works. So I think these kids are far more exposed. I mean, where were even the books on some of these contemporary artists when we were growing up, Anu? I mean, you know, we were fortunate that we had this interest in the arts and we had the time with these artists and they took us under our wing to explain this to us. It's really because that doesn't exist in that same way right now. I said, let's have an institution there that they could go to and they could learn this from. So that's really the purpose of doing, I mean, the whole reason behind MAP is to be a little catalyst. And we believe we can be the catalyst of change in the Indian sector. In spite of there being 1,000 museums, it can be this one museum which catalyzes this entire sector. I mean, to think of 10 of the corporates who supported us have never supported the arts in the past. And they've all given us, you know, large checks and come forward to do this. The fact that technology companies are talking to us and doing this, they are participating with our education programs. it all means that we are doing something right.
I love the pairing of items from your collection with items in other museums' collection, so that there's a conversation between the two. I mean, that's spectacular, really spectacular.
No.
Because I think that
No,
one of the go ahead.
No, complete, please.
One of the things that people are not used to, I think, is the idea of interpretations, so that you know it's legitimate to have different interpretations of exactly the same thing. And by having that conversation between the two objects and the two museums, often the two worldviews, you really expand that conversation and make things very much alive.
And what was exciting about this entire concept was, how else do we take our collection out there? And if we were doing something with the British Museum and the British Museum puts it on their website, so many other people get to know about MAP, which they otherwise would not. And every museum that we've asked has said yes. And sometimes they've almost come back and said, why the hell didn't they think about this idea before we did? So what we've gone and done is we've gone and spoken to another 100 museums and blocked in slots for next year, because we don't want anyone else to patent this idea, and we want everyone to know it's our idea.
I find it interesting in my own family that my older daughter and son-in-law, I was about to say aren't collectors, but Anthony very definitely is a collector of comic books, but of art. And Ilan and Tommy have a spectacular collection of street art. And, they find, young people find what interests them. And it's available. That's important. When kids are starting out collecting, price point is also important of what you would. I think that's why photography years ago was such an important medium for collecting. It wasn't in those days in the millions of dollars. So absolutely. I kind of love the creativity of what young people are finding to collect.
I'll give you an example here, Barbara. This was almost, may have been 27, 28 years ago or 30 years ago. And I had picked up this entire collection of Bollywood posters. And in those days, the Bollywood posters were put up on the street side until the first rain came and washed it off, or the first goat came and chewed it up, because it was only to be seen while you were driving past in a car. And I never thought very much of it. I found them interesting. These were lithographs from the 40s, 50s, 60s. And I found them with a dealer, and I ended up buying a whole collection. And I remember there was a gallery which asked me, they had a gap for an exhibition, and they said, can we put up something interesting? And I said, why don't you think about showing these? And I had about 15 or 20 which were duplicates. And they put that up there. And then she calls me 2 days later and she says, can you please come down to Bombay? Because I said, why? This is such an ordinary show. She's saying the press are going crazy. They all want to interview you. And I said, well, if you can line up about 5 or 6 interviews. She lined up about 12 interviews, including with Newsweek. And they were all there because they had never seen this as art before. And it became the sensation. I had paid the princely sum of 100 rupees a poster, which is about $1.50 each. Now, some of those posters have sold at auction thereafter for maybe $1,500 or $2,000. But, it's never a matter of price. It's a matter of timing. Even when it comes to photography or popular culture. I mean, when I was in my late teens and I was buying popular culture, nobody was looking at it. And therefore we had the best of the best available, because people even didn't think of this as collectible. Even when you looked at folk and tribal art, those jungars, which today have gone for, $250,000 at times, some of those I may have paid like $500 for. So
What
I
is,
think every
what is your
generation
focus
picks
of
up.
collecting right now?
You know, I think the focus has moved from collecting to building the museum. You can either build a collection or a museum. You can't do them both together simultaneously, unless, of course, I've got as many zeros as I would like to sign off. But the good part is whenever something fantastic comes, and you know, I'm not talking about huge, like millions of dollars, but I'm talking about when it's $150,000, $200,000, there are some people I can call up, and I would only call them if I know I'm getting them a really good deal, and they would say, Abhishek, buy it, and this is our gift for you. So far, nobody has said no. So I've been fortunate. In fact, sometimes it's come together as a group of people who have got together and said, okay, take it as a gift from our side. So there are different things that come like that.
Will the same people be also contributing financially?
So generally what has happened, Barbara, is whoever has given a collection as a gift, they've also contributed financially. But what I have done is, it's not that I am asking people to give me a gift and to give me money. This is their generosity as to what they want to give. But I do know what is going to excite somebody to put their name to it.
Mhm.
And this is what museums do all over the world, except that this doesn't happen very much in India. So you know, you don't want to ask and hear a no. So you also ask very selectively. But you have to really know that, okay, if this thing comes, so and so is not going to say no.
What about the artists themselves? Are they getting involved? I mean, there's so many contemporary, like tribal photo, and there's so many areas of photography that India is involved in contemporaneously. Why wouldn't the artists be involved, especially in photography? I'm thinking, why wouldn't the
No,
artists?
so we have gotten quite a lot of gifts from artists, but you know, sometimes what also happens is, in the case of an artist, they are giving the gift because they want to be represented in your collection and they are wanting a museum show. And it therefore becomes a little bit of a dicey situation as to, are you taking the gift just to oblige them, or are you taking the gift because it deserves to be in a museum? So very often we will not take it conditionally. And you know, there's an acquisition committee which would take that decision, because very often we have either not accepted a gift because it's not up to the standard, or we would only accept the gift if it doesn't come with a condition.
Have you been able to reach out to the Indian community in a lot of cities around the world for philanthropy?
Not too much, Barbara. I think we have spoken to some Indians in the US, but not in most other parts of the world. And you know, very often, I mean, the one main reason we even started our US Foundation and got our 501c3 over there is, if you really look at the history of philanthropy in India, I'm not talking about 50 years ago where everybody used to give money. Today, a lot of the philanthropy that happens in India is, you know, philanthropy which happens only when you have no other choice. And very often families still try to keep the wealth within the family. And if you look at what are the endowments that any Indians have given within India, I mean, you'll find it's to Harvard and you know, to universities abroad. Have the IITs and IIMs managed to get the same kind of donations from Indians? No. Which museums have gotten gifts of art from Indians over here? But many of the Indians have given their art overseas. That's also because these institutions did not exist in the past. The reason it has started happening in the last 3-4 years is you have Indian institutions being built like the Ashoka University, like Plaksha, like you know, museums like MAP and others, because earlier people didn't even have the opportunity. Who would they want to give it to? You don't want to give it to a government museum and then see that it is sitting with some IAS officer, or it's being neglected and not being looked after. So I think the whole way philanthropy is being looked at by this generation in India has also got to change. So far, it was really towards religion or health or education, and they bought this as a ticket to go to heaven, so that my soul can rest in peace. It wasn't really committed to a cause that they believed in necessarily. It's beginning to change now.
I
A lot
know
of the
when I was considering giving a portion of my collection, because I very much wanted it to be somewhere in Asia and at a museum, because I felt like giving back. But in those days, I was warned, don't do it. It'll just be sold out from under the collections. So you were a godsend, Avhishek.
Likewise, Barbara. I mean, I'll give you another story here. This was many years ago. A Swiss collector, I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago, a Swiss collector who had collected some significant Indian art wanted to donate that Indian art to India. And in those days, it was only one of the government museums that could have received a gift like that. So I put him in touch with the people, and he was horrified. And he tells me many months later, he said, would you believe it? I got a letter back saying that we'll be glad to accept the donation that you're giving, but provided you're going to pay the import duty on it. He said, it doesn't cost me import duty to throw it down the Alps. Why the hell should I be giving millions of dollars worth of art to India and having to pay duty on that as well? So this was the attitude that, the Indian government had.
So there's no tax advantage.
No, forget tax advantage here. It was a
It's an
tax
outgoing-
disadvantage.
Yeah,
Yeah. So today we
It's
have
a
managed
cost.
to get permission that if we get a brilliant piece of art, we can import it into the country without paying tax on it because it's coming for a museum.
and you're also set up with an American 401c3, so
Yeah, yeah.
it's
So
deductible.
we can give the tax benefit to you in America.
But I remember walking through small little museums in mountain kingdoms and going, I've got better than that. It was real snobby, but my collections were lovely and theirs were kind of dusty, and you had no idea how stunning the pieces might be because they were so encrusted with gunk.
But that's because most of these museums don't even have a restoration facility. I mean, education facility is non-existent in Indian museums. Outreach facilities, even having a publication or something. I mean, they rarely have a show that changes except for some of the larger museums. The budgets go only into salaries and upkeep.
I
So
was
it's a
at a,
really archaic situation here.
I
You know,
was at a,
you're talking in America, which has one of the most advanced museum systems in the world. And we have amongst the most backward situations here.
I
You
just,
modeled your museum after any museum in the world?
Museum in Chennai.
Not really, Barbara. I think this has really been a hybrid model where we've seen what would work for us. And we've also been really nimble and adapted. Because none of us come from the museum background, we've really looked at anything that made sense and would work in the Indian context and use that to pivot around and to use that as something to base our model on. So I can't say that is this, this part has been taken from here and that part from here. Of course, it was a conversation like what we are having right now, where somebody said, why don't you do a 501c3? Because then Americans understand philanthropy. You can learn how that happens. You can get people over here to give you gifts that you can take back and monies. And it was that which led us to start a US foundation and do a 501c3. It was in the board meeting that they even talked about an endowment. Till then, we hadn't even thought about having an endowment. So we've learned as we've gone along, and what seems like basic common sense was not what we were born with.
you know, I've walked through many Indian museums, one in Bangalore, where they have pails out collecting the rainwater, you know, and it's dripping. Or the extraordinary jewels of the Nizams in Delhi, where there were two of us who were visitors, and it was an extraordinary exhibition. You know, maybe it was not an hour that tourists were around to come be in awe. But I've never been impressed with Indian museums, so I'm thrilled by MAP.
Better have a good gift shop.
Oh,
I
yeah.
agree. But
We're going to
that's
have a
true.
very good gift shop.
No, that,
And we're-
well, you've got the experience with cinnamon. Of course, you're going to have a great gift shop.
The first place I go to.
And we're going to have it all virtual and online, so that make sure if we don't have you in as a patron, at least we've got you as a client.
Don't worry. Don't you worry.
Abhishek, I wonder, we've had the similar experience we've been to India several times, and the example that comes to my mind is the government museum in Chennai with the Chola bronzes.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything quite so humbling, quite so beautiful. We were there for 3 hours. I just couldn't get enough of them, but I had to really work to see them because they were showed so poorly.
Exactly.
And
it's
no
a
air
good thing
conditioning.
Because
And I'm
when you
wondering
see
though,
the quality of that collection, but you know, they leave so much to be desired.
Yes, but I have two issues here. One is resources. I don't see India as being a wealthy country in the sense of giving a lot of money to preserving their heritage. But then another part of that is I'm wondering, how much do the Indians themselves value their heritage? Because
I
I
think
never
also,
get that quite clear.
I think partly it's because they have not been shown what it means to value their heritage.
Yeah.
The ones who go overseas, they value their heritage, but they don't even know what role they can play over here. It's always been considered that this is the government's job and their prerogative, and they don't have a role to play. The moment you start making them feel responsible and you start showing them the difference it can make. I mean, something that we've recently been able to do is launch a collaboration with Facebook. And this is the very first time that Facebook has launched a global collaboration, and that's with MAP. You know, when we are talking about our opening on the 5th of December, we are looking at, when we were doing a physical opening, we would have had 200 people for our opening. And even if we did this across a week, we would have had 1,000 people. Here we are looking at 100,000 people for our opening. Mm-hmm. And the point was, how are we going to get so many people? So I said, let's go to Facebook, and they are marketing our stuff to 215 million people every week. In our first week of tying up with them, we get 1.1 million views. This is what a normal museum gets in a year. Mm-hmm. So I think when you say Indians are not interested in art, that's not true. We just haven't packaged it properly for them.
No, I don't think they know. I don't think they value.
Exactly.
It's
and
not,
you know, we
historical
started looking at folk and tribal art and miniature paintings from different areas. I mean, today I think MAP had done a workshop with a Madhubani artist. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll give you an example. There's this fantastic collection which has recently come up for sale, which I'm trying to find a buyer for to gift it to us. It is possibly one of the most staggering collection of Madhubani paintings. It's, you know, once it is restored and packaged properly, it would be, and once the world sees what it is, it'll be something so fantastic. It's not even worth a small painting by a well-known Indian artist. I mean, for something like $150,000, we can buy this entire collection. I know I've got a window in, if I don't find somebody at that period, I'll buy it personally and give it. But I'm saying there are such amazing things sometimes that still come up because people have not bothered about it so far.
So I guess my question is, the more I hear, the more I think your digital efforts are going to render the greatest rewards, because you need to reach people. They need to know and have what they see in a context, a cultural context that is meaningful to them, exactly what museums hold. Regardless, they can always get to the museum. That will never be an experience like seeing a beloved piece of art in person, in situ, in a museum. But there are many people who need to know exactly what their culture is all about.
Yeah. And it's not just that, because people who are not in Bangalore and who can't physically make it to Bangalore, the only way they can see the museum is online.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pandemic or no pandemic.
And I think this is going to seed a whole generation of people who want to collect, who want to contribute. I think this is the beginning. Education is the beginning of changing maybe an attitude towards contributing, a philanthropy in Indian culture that doesn't exist now. Just a thought.
But that's what we also want to catalyze over here, along with the museum going culture, because India just doesn't have a museum going culture.
Yeah, I don't think.
A friend tells a story about having watched roadworks, and it was a decommissioned Shiva statue that was no longer being used. It no longer had its essences, and he just watched it being turned into pebbles and used in a road. So, because if it wasn't being used as a devotional piece, it was of no value.
Yeah.
It strikes me that with your growing international presence, there's going to be an interesting effect on tourism in Bangalore and maybe broader in India. By that I mean, most of the guides, the licensed government guides, as you know, are not familiar with art. Many people come to India and they're never even taken to a museum because the guides don't get a little feedback that the stores will give. And I see a time when people will be coming to Bangalore and saying to whoever their travel agent is, but I must go to MAC.
Oh, absolutely. And the good part is we have all the big IT companies here, and they have so many visitors that come. Everybody is looking forward to doing this, and the kind of support we are getting from all of them, because they've got people who are working from home. They want their employees to be able to enjoy art, their families to be able to enjoy art. This does not even go out of their CSR budget. It goes out of employee benefit. I mean, we've had people who've tuned into us. They said, listen, we want to buy 100 memberships to gift it to our friends, because you don't need to be in Bangalore to be able to enjoy it. So that's how the word is spreading around and people are registering.
But I mean, people who just go to Bangalore as a tourist who have no business connection wouldn't normally be taken to a museum, but they're going to put pressure on the travel industry.
Well, we hope what you're saying is true. And,
I think, yeah.
Somebody asked me, how would you consider MAP being a success? What would be your measure for success? And I said, if I can see a long line snaking out of the building, going around the block and waiting to get in, exactly the way that you would imagine what happens in another museum over there. I said, for me, that would be the nicest sight to see every time I pass, that there are these 200 people waiting in queue to get into the museum.
Are you selling memberships now?
We're going to be selling them from December, but we can always reserve them for you, and absolutely, write to me.
I really have to be careful what I ask you.
Barbara.
You need a GoFundMe page.
Abhishek, you may have heard that the longest lines outside any museum in LA, which has great, great museums, is at a private museum, the Broad.
Yeah.
He has more money than God, sweetie.
I know.
It's free to get into the Broad, and with appointments, the lines really aren't so bad. The lines are for the people who haven't bought their tickets in advance.
No, so what we are also doing, Betty, is there would be a certain time where you can get into MAP. I mean, there'll be free entry because we definitely don't want to distinguish between people who can afford and who can't afford.
Well, yeah,
Of course, there would be,
I think-
and there are some galleries which would always be free, but there would be certain shows which would be ticketed as well.
Yeah, well, that's just practice.
What will be the cost of an individual membership?
It's going to be very little. I think it's going to be in the region of $50 a year. So you can buy as many as you want to gift away as well.
always ever marketing. I wanted to add something about what we were talking about before about am I on mute?
No.
We can hear
Oh,
you.
good. It's about the digital aspect, because this is something that was this insular life that the pandemic has brought us to is something that was predicted by actually an art philosopher from the late 20th century, well, mid to late, probably 1970s, 80s, a man named Baudrillard in Paris, who wrote about a prediction long before we were all on our computers and all with the internet, that we would be leading insular lives, that we would be doing exactly what we're doing now with Instacart, ordering our groceries and Amazon, and having everything delivered to us, and basically never having to leave our screens if we don't choose to. So the technology being in place before the pandemic, it almost seems some sort of bizarre karma. But I was also just wanted to add that it's so great that you're going to have everything digitalized and available, not just for those who want to look at art, but I know that I'm grateful because I lecture about art all the time, and I'm always looking for great images to include in lectures, not for publication. So it wouldn't be about rights, but I'm always looking for great images. I work for a company out here that has moved to a digital format. It's called Art Muse LA. You might want to put them on your radar because they do private museum tours, and they have, prior to the epidemic, the pandemic, I should say, they have moved into travel, but we've been doing online lectures for Art Muse.
You said this is Art MEWS?
No,
Or MUSE?
MUSE, Art
Okay.
Muse LA.
Okay.
And
I'll
I
check it
think
out.
that if you want, I can talk to you more about it
Sure.
offline, but we've been doing online museum tours, lectures about other things. In fact, I'm going to be doing one soon, and I don't mean to be tooting my own horn, but
Go, girl.
Yeah, you bet. We'll be there.
when Michael was talking about loving the Chola bronzes in Chennai, the second greatest collection of Chola bronzes is right here in the Los Angeles area in Pasadena at the Norton Simon Museum.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
And we know that our fabulous vice presidential candidate her family hails from Tamil Nadu. So we're going to be doing I'm starting this lecture with, what do these two women have in common, with a statue of Durga and a picture of Kamala Harris. But that's coming up.
Can we get a link to that?
I think you were on the list from the last one that I did for them. So
Good.
you'll all be getting that.
But Avhishek, talking about research a little, are you set up so that if Betty is looking for images on a certain topic, that they can be plucked?
Just tell me what you're looking for and I'll send you the link to our database.
But
So we
it
need to-
is searchable.
is it searchable to the public, or is it searchable
Well,
with access from you?
Not yet, Betty, but if you tell us what you're looking for, we can
Great.
do that search and send it to you to start with. But we do hope that in time it would be searchable to the public.
Well, I
In
would
fact,
love to include it. Yeah, I
what
would love to.
Microsoft is doing for us is something quite interesting. And they've come on as a member of Map Labs, and we are talking about this, is not just to make, how do you find, like in Museums Without Borders, a twin of what would be in the map collection, which exists in other museums around the world. But eventually it could be, if you've inherited a drawing or a painting from your grandmother and you want to search for that image as to what else is like that around the world, and not just give you images, but even give you write-ups about it. So you just don't get what it looks like, but academic information about it, and to link it to the Map Academy encyclopedia. So, we are looking at 2 steps ahead when we are talking about all this.
That's so important. I have a friend and colleague here in Los Angeles who has one of the great collections of Indian miniature paintings. Her name is, you may know her, Catherine Benkhame.
Yeah, of course.
So Kathy's a good friend. And I know that she just, a lot of her collection is now at the Cleveland Museum. Her Mogul collection went to the Cleveland Museum. But Kathy spends her time building a database that will be donated to an institution at some point.
I'm aware of her collection because I sit on the Cleveland Museum advisory board.
Oh, so you know Kathy, of course.
Yeah. No, I don't know her, but I know about her collection.
Yeah, she's a remarkable scholar and remarkably generous. But the idea that these collections are being made available, so a lot of things, yes, it's wonderful to go in museums, and I miss that frisson of cultural experience, whether it's in a museum or a theater or a musical experience, of that moment of being with other people and feeling that energy that one gets from a work of art. But the fact that so much art is in private collections that we would never get to see unless there are these databases.
Yeah, true. In fact,
I'm grateful.
When I see great collections, and people are now also more generous about making sure that this is available to people. Earlier in India, people are still a lot more careful, because if it is registered or not registered, then the government comes after you. Where did you inherit it from? But in the West, that's not the case at all. And people over there want that to be seen. Of course, if somebody is wanting the money for it, they would rather sell it. But otherwise, they want it widely published. They want it widely circulated, because they would even give a promise gift. And now you see them more and more open to giving it back to India, because some of the greatest Indian art exists outside of India, and it's not here anymore, which is really sad.
It's interesting. When I did the New Narratives exhibition in 20, so long ago now, 2007. Gosh,
Yeah,
it feels like yesterday. I was in India, and I went to speak to.
Here it is.
Oh, wow. Barbara, thank you. I went to see the then director of the National Museum, the Modern Art Museum in Delhi, Rajiv, whatever. Yeah, Lochan. And my initial input was that I wanted to give back. I wanted that exhibit to go to India, but it was being made so difficult for me to do that, even though I had borrowed works from India and had wonderful collaborations with artists on an individual level to get the works that were in that show. The museums just set up all sorts of roadblocks. It was,
but
and I was sorry about that.
Very slowly. And I'm sorry that they're not doing that enough. And that is one reason we said it's simpler for us to do shows from what we have within the country, rather than having the issues of import and permissions and, all those government approvals, they make it a nightmare.
I remember talking to Anupam Poddar, and I don't, you're related somehow, I imagine.
I'm not sure we are related, but Lekha, his mother, is on our advisory board, and she's a very close
they're
friend.
terrific. And
Yeah.
he was so forthcoming to me with me in my early research. But when I wanted to borrow certain things, he said he wouldn't lend anything, because when he had lent a piece, excuse me, it's early in the morning here, my mind isn't 100%. He had lent a work that the country then wanted to charge him duty to bring it back in.
Yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes
So-
they have all those kinds of stupid
You know,
rules.
and there's nobody, you need to find the person who can say yes. And nobody wants to say yes because they might get into trouble. There might be a problem.
But we are going to change everything, Betty.
It
Slowly and
sounds like it.
steadily and surely.
I'm so sorry I didn't meet you when you were in Chicago. Right now I'm sort of exiled in paradise here in California, because I haven't been willing to risk air travel to come back to Chicago. However, I look forward to visiting your museum. I'm so excited about it.
Absolutely. You all are all invited to the digital opening. And Barbara, please remember to send everybody an invitation, which
We're
I'll be
coming.
forwarding to you.
December 5th.
Yeah.
I have to,
I'll
I've
be
already
there.
put it in my calendar. I jotted that as soon as you said
So
it.
December
Abhishek.
5th is the first opening. And then every day after that, we have one department opening. So one day will be photography, it'll be modern and contemporary. So for a week long, so you've actually got a festival.
Nice.
Barbara, I have to ask you a question.
Please.
When we were in Paris, we saw pictures of the Maharaja of Indoor's palace and his apartments around the world that were absolutely over the top. I mean, and he was at the top of the world of fashion, very influential and extremely refined taste. I'm just wondering, have you ever met him? I mean, have you, or the family, or I mean, not him, of course, not him himself, but have you seen any of this work in
Oh,
person?
yeah. Right. So let me tell you,
Is it as
that
gorgeous as it looks?
it is even better than it looks. And my wife's family bought a portion of the palace and lived in that same premises. And a lot of the Methusias furniture that you would have seen in that show is
Yes.
actually in their home, and including some pieces of jewelry which used to belong to Yashwant Rao's family. And his daughter, who is now the Maharani of Indore, and her husband are also silent patrons of MAP and very, very close friends.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear that.
Nice.
It made quite an impression on me.
Yeah.
I had no idea. This was back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s.
That's
I had
correct.
no
That's
idea
correct.
that
Yeah.
they were he played such a pivotal role in the world
Yeah.
of fashion and fine arts, decorative arts.
And design, exactly.
And design,
It was one of the quietest but the most gorgeous palaces,
Yes.
an Art Deco palace done in Indore. Yeah.
Oh, I'm thrilled. It
So-
gives
so
me other
his-
reason to come to India.
His daughter from his Indian wife,
Yeah.
who had built the palace with him, she must be about close to 90 now, or at least in her late 80s. So she and her husband are patrons of MAP.
Wonderful. Good.
And
Thank
we've
you.
got some beautiful photographs of the palace. And some pieces of furniture from the palace are at home, which will eventually go to the museum as well.
It's got to be stunning.
Abhishek, so Jerry and I will send you some information about a project that we did based on found photographs at the end of World War II by an American soldier, but of Indian village life. And then we
Wow.
worked with contemporary Indian artists to interpret those photos. And so
Okay.
we'll send you a catalog and talk to
Please,
you
I
about
would
some
love that.
separately.
I've been
would love that.
wanting the three of you to connect. You know that.
Yeah. When I saw this, it's like, we
Yeah.
will get up early to do this, you know.
Perfect.
It's nice that this worked out very well.
Oh, it's perfect.
Abhishek, thank you. And I knew this would be phenomenal. And you've got a lot of fans in this group.
No, thank you, Barbara. You're all very, very kind and generous. Thank you for taking out this time, for changing the time and doing it before you normally do. And I'm glad it worked out. And sorry for waking you all up before even God wakes up, Barbara. And,
Most
I
of
didn't put
us,
you all to sleep.
most of us here are up very early. Shama and I were texting.
Speak for yourself.
We're texting very early.
I set my
But-
alarm for 5:30 this morning.
Yeah.
Because this is
Okay.
7 o'clock. This
That's
one
commitment.
started
Eddie
at
gets
7
the
for
first
me.
prize.
But I'm so glad I did. Abhishek, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you.
Likewise,
And
Betty.
stay
Thank you.
healthy. I hope your healing
Yeah,
continues.
I'm going to be fine. I think tomorrow is my last day of quarantine.
Be well, be safe, and we hope to all be there to celebrate with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Forward to that very
definitely.
much.
Thank
And
you.
also here to
Bye.
celebrate.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.